presentation by Healthy Leadership CIC. Coping in a Toxic Environment by Healthy Leadership CIC. Toxic environments are unfortunately more common than we would like them to be, and some of us do have to work in them, and we have worked in them. So to help you think about how to cope in a toxic environment, I'm going to explain what is toxicity, the effect it has on you, help you think about how you currently cope and how you could cope in the future. There will be some questions for you to explore your experience of toxicity. So please have a notepad with you. Remember that reflections can be difficult, so please take as many breaks as you need. So what is toxicity? The literal definition is that it is poison. And very unfortunately, that's actually a fairly accurate description. It would be nice to have a better description, but that's the one that we have at the moment. Toxicity is insidious, it creeps everywhere, it impacts everyone, including those who use these behaviors. So let's see what we can do about managing and working in a toxic environment. The typical behaviors, and we can all name them, they include the odd comment said now and again, to more serious ones such as serial bullying and harassment. The severity, frequency, and intensity of these behaviors will vary, and collectively they contribute to the impact of those behaviors, and this will also depend on the person who is the target. So for someone, one negative comment said 5 times can be more damaging than being shouted at once a month. So let's now have a look at the behaviors that have an effect on you. Remember to have your notepad ready. So think about which behaviors you are experiencing, who is using these behaviors and when, what is the impact for you, and who else is affected. Think about these questions and write your answers. If you aren't currently in a toxic environment, please use a past example. So having looked at the behaviors you are experiencing, let's consider the effects. Stress levels are going to be high because what you're likely to be doing is anticipating that next negative comment or action. And the stress is going to negatively affect your thinking and your decision-making and your ability to concentrate. So you're likely to be making mistakes. Your work and social life could be affected because you may be wanting to avoid certain people. Similarly, your private life could be affected because working in a toxic environment has a toll. Your emotions could be negatively impacted, especially if you've had to suppress at work. Your patience may not be what it could be, again, because you're having to work in a toxic environment and you're waiting for that next comment or action. So think about the effects of these behaviors and write down what they are for you. Why do people use these behaviors? Because they can. That's a very simple answer and it's often true. But it could also be because they're feeling insecure. They may want to feel that they have to control the group or the team. And this may be because they have had little management development, so they don't have a full repertoire of leadership behaviors to use. A very few could be called psychopaths or Machiavellians, but this is difficult to diagnose in the business settings. If, however, the person can be called a sociopath or a psychopath or a Machiavellian, then they are very likely to find it difficult to change. The most you could expect from them is more appropriate behaviors, but they're unlikely to change behind those behaviors. What are the signs that you're working in a toxic environment? Here are common signs. Firstly, HR systems could be ineffective. They may well be in place, the policies may exist, but they may be not used or misused. Similarly, with internal justice systems, which normally consist of ombudspeople, a reporting system, an investigation arm, etc., they could be not in existence or not used properly. There are likely to be cliques. People could have favorites. Negative gossip or banter, especially about those who are targeted, could be common. Frequent use of other toxic behaviors would also be present. A lot of intimidation. Very little compassion, respect, or decency will be shown except for the favored few. There is very likely to be a serial failure to tackle toxicity. Communication is likely to be unhealthy. There could be poor or awful leadership. People are likely to be just doing their jobs and little more. There usually is a high use of sick leave, a lot of staff turnover. People feel very limited. And there is very likely to be a lack of loyalty and motivation. So think about what the signs are in your current environment, but also think about what is positive, because there will be one or two things that are positive that are worth building on. So think about both of these things, what is present in terms of toxic signs and what is positive, and write them down. So what can you do to cope with being in a toxic environment? And the first and most important thing is to gather your strengths. Because usually being in a toxic environment means that you've forgotten your wonderful qualities. You've forgotten who you are as you hunker down and try and manage in this very difficult environment. So take some time to remember who you are. Think about what is wonderful. If you were in a supportive environment, how good could you be at your job? What do you consider is your greatest achievement at work? How brave have you had to be? So think about these questions and then write a paragraph about the brilliant you and keep it somewhere where you can keep looking at it. Then remember self-care. And again, when people are working in toxic environments, they often forget how to look after themselves, even if they've done that well in the past. So think about what you do or have done to manage your self-care in terms of well-being, physical health, healthy living and working, social, what do you do socially to get support? How have you kept your self-respect? How have you maintained your hopes and dreams? So in each of those areas, think about what is working and think about how you can reinstate the good practices and habits that you had. What needs to change to allow you to go back to how you used to look after yourself? Make a note and make a promise to yourself. It is also important to rebuild and let go of the past. And you can do this very simply, is sit down and write down all the negative things that have happened to you. Think about what you've learned, and then tear up that piece of paper. Pause, and then use a second piece of paper to imagine your future self when you've left the toxic environment and how you will feel, what you will do, what you will say, and what is necessary to help you build confidence. And keep that note somewhere so that you can keep looking at it and going back to it. Sometimes it helps to talk to a counselor or a clinical psychologist to rebuild and recover. And finally, here are some things you can do to actually manage the toxicity. First, think about what you have done, either formally, informally, or silently. And each of those courses require equal amounts of courage. What you want to do will depend on your courage, your life circumstances, and the support that is available, especially if you're taking formal action. So have a look to see how formal action has been successful in your organization, whether the leadership are supportive of this, and if you then feel strong enough and have enough support, then take formal action. But remember that it can take about 18 months for there to be a resolution if you take formal action. You could choose to act less formally, like, for example, talking to a more senior manager. Or you could stay silent, sometimes, always, and that takes as much courage, as I have said earlier, as taking formal action. Sometimes it is your only option. Some people choose to leave, but if you choose to leave, make sure that you choose when you want to go and where you go to, so that it is part of your path for your career, as opposed to just leaving for the sake of it. Make sure that you build in factors to help you recover and rebuild, as I mentioned earlier. So think of all of the things I've said about what you need to help you recover and help you manage in this toxic environment, about remembering who you are, ensuring your self-care, rebuilding and recovering, deciding what you want to do about the toxicity. Create a plan and make a promise to yourself that you want to keep. Please ensure that you have good support and courage. Thank you.